ALC crew, week 10, 2021. Here's what's going on this week. Your work, Journal 2, Reading Strategy and Social Justice, and this week's to-do. First, your work.
Christian S. wrote, "Reading has been a beneficial and positive experience in my life. I also decided to choose the book Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds because topics talked about in the book include gun violence, and it interests me to read these types of books. I myself do not really consider myself as much of a reader, but when I do read a book that interests me, I have a very positive experience." Tasia T. wrote, "I would describe the impact reading has had on my life as minimal. I don't consider myself a reader unless I have to read. It's always been something that never stuck with me. But when I do read, I like to read in my room. It's just the most comfortable place to me. I also like to read books about African Americans and our culture, or different issues that are going on that involve us, which is the reason why I chose the book Punching the Air by E.B. Zuboy. This book is about a boy named Amal who was convicted of a crime he didn't commit and sent to prison. While in prison, Amal learns to use his art to change the anger and rage he felt being in prison. I believe this connects to my life because a lot of African Americans are incarcerated for crimes they didn't commit, and I am African American, so I feel I can relate to this book more than most books I've read in the past." Rigoberto R. wrote, "The impact of reading gets me to make my views on certain topics in life, which guided me to choose Dear Martin by Nick Stone as my book. I consider myself as somewhat of a reader because I read news articles that appear on social media about topics, news outlets, and sometimes books. I read in my kitchen during the day because it is quiet there, with little interruption. I like to read graphic novels and books that match up with current events. My favorite book is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas and The Outsiders by S.E. Hilton. I chose Dear Martin by Nick Stone because the book deals with racism, which is a current event in everyday real life, and reading it will give me a first-hand look on how someone deals with being racially profiled." Miriam A. wrote, "I don't consider myself a reader, but if I were to read, I would be reading mostly in my room. When I read, my favorite books to read are mystery or romance. I chose the book Stamped by Jason Reynolds. I chose this book because of the cover and the author. The cover has a shadow of a guy and red lines, and I thought that was cool how the book had racism, anti-racism, and you written on the cover, showing how the author is trying to make you involved in the book by mentioning you. The other reason I chose the book was because of the author. I read Jason Reynolds' All-American Boys, and it was not like other books. It sucked you in, and I really enjoyed it. This book isn't much different from the other book I read because that book was The Roundhouse, which was also about justice and racism." Selma B. wrote, "Although I don't find myself picking up a book and reading it as much as I would like to, the several books I have read for the most part have been interesting stories. Reading is like watching a show, but you picture it all, in a way like you're your own director. Reading has impacted me in the sense of when I start a book that has my attention, I don't want to stop reading. My decision to read this book was because I am somewhat familiar with who Jazz is because of having watched her TV show called I Am Jazz. I was interested in knowing more about her younger self and hearing it all from her perspective. Her book is her place to openly speak on her whole entire journey so far. The book also fits in with our social justice theme because the book has to do with Jazz getting treated equally no matter what anyone else thinks of her." Gabriella A. wrote, "Do I consider myself a reader? Not necessarily, but I do read when I can and when it is intriguing. Reading is more a goal of mine because it will be beneficial rather than using electronic devices all the time. When I read, I like to choose books that are nonfiction and sometimes fiction depending on what it's about. I also like to read novels where I can learn more and I can relate to. Some of my favorite books are The Hate You Give and The Fault in Our Stars. The novel I have chosen is called Just Mercy, which is based on a true story of injustice towards black people, which is an issue that occurs in this country towards different races and people of color." Malik A. wrote, "To begin with, I somewhat consider myself a reader. When I read, I usually read in my room during the night because it's quiet. The types of books I read are just one type, that being manga. I love reading it because it illustrates what you're reading in a unique and beautiful way, which makes reading all the more enjoyable for me. For this assignment, I chose the book Love from A to Z by S.K. Ali. I chose this book because it brought an interesting topic about bringing justice for disabled people, and that really intrigued me to read it."
Great work. As we move into our second week of our Social Justice Student Choice Reading Unit, we'll focus on two topics, reading strategy and social justice, over the course of 6 questions. First, reading strategy questions. 1. How is the reading going for you? 2. How would you describe the difficulty level of the book? How do you know? 3. Tell me about a time this book confused you and what you did to get yourself back on track in your understanding. Second, the social justice related questions. 4. What do you see as the central social justice problem of your book? 5. How does this problem affect the characters in the story? And 6. What connections do you see between the social justice struggle in your book and the ones in our world? As you develop your journal response, consider responding in one of the following 2 formats. 1. Question answer. Number your entries 1 through 6 and write a sentence or 2 for each question. Or 2, write a more open-ended response that explores the bigger ideas of reading strategy and social justice within the context of your chosen book. So what do we have to do? 1. Continue reading your book up until your next checkpoint. And 2. Write journal number 2, Reading Strategy and Social Justice. This will be due on Friday, March 12th by 11:59 p.m. That's it for this one, ALC crew. We'll see you in virtual class. In the meantime, stay safe, stay focused, and stay connected.